1 in 3 adults has high blood pressure. Most feel nothing until something breaks. Your doctor calls it the silent one. No warning, just pressure, climbing year after year. 18 plants have been tested in clinical trials for exactly this. Most are already in your kitchen or your yard. Number 4, outperformed an apple in a controlled trial measuring 24-hour blood pressure. You've probably mowed it down. Number 11, most people call it a summer treat. Researchers call its main compound a vessel relaxer. One of these, in a head-to-head trial, held its own against a starting dose prescription. It's a tea most of the world already drinks. I spent 20 years as a registered nurse. I watched those numbers climb on chart after chart. Nobody showed patients what was already growing nearby. I'm not telling you to stop a prescription. I'm telling you there's a shelf of research most people never see because there's no marketing budget behind a head of garlic. 18 plants. Real trials. I'll be straight with you about every single one, the strong evidence and the thin. Let's start with garlic. Garlic's been sitting in kitchens for so long, most of us stopped thinking of it as anything but flavor. I know I did for most of my nursing career. It took retirement and a lot of hours in the dirt before I sat down and actually read the research behind the things already living in my own pantry. Here's the kitchen table version of what's going on inside your body. Garlic contains sulfur compounds that, once broken down, signal your blood vessels to loosen up a little, like unclenching a fist that's been closed too long. Looser vessels mean the same amount of blood can move through with less pressure pushing against the walls. Researchers have pooled results from dozens of trials on this, some going back decades. In people who already had high blood pressure, garlic supplements brought systolic numbers down noticeably more than in people whose readings were already normal. Potent, that's the word that kept showing up as I read through it. Mostly in the people who needed it most. There's a detail worth knowing before you toss a clove into a hot pan. The compound doing most of this work, allicin, only forms once garlic is crushed or chopped, and heat destroys it quickly. Chop first, then let it sit on the board for 10 minutes before it ever touches oil. That resting time lets the reaction finish. Skip it, and you're adding flavor, not much else. It's not a cure, and I'll be saying some version of that 18 times today, so let's get it settled early. Garlic is a food with research behind it, not a prescription. If your numbers run high, your doctor needs to stay in that conversation. But a clove a day, chopped and rested before it hits the heat, that's a small, God-given habit worth building. Next, we're pulling something out of the ground that stains your hands red for a good reason. Beets. I grow rows of them out back, mostly because they're stubborn and don't ask for much. Rain or no rain, they just keep going. There's something worth learning from that, if you let it be. Here's the mechanism. Plain and simple. Beets are loaded with something called dietary nitrate. Once you eat it, your body converts that nitrate into nitric oxide. And nitric oxide is basically a signal telling the muscle lining your blood vessels to relax. Picture opening the windows on a stuffy room. Same air in the house, but now there's room for it to move. This isn't just a root vegetable, it's a nitrate factory, and researchers have measured it directly. Trials using beetroot juice have shown consistent drops in systolic pressure, the top number, often within a matter of hours, and that effect holds up across a whole stack of controlled studies now, not just one or two. One detail surprises people every time I mention it. The bacteria living on the back of your tongue are actually part of how this works. They're what starts converting that nitrate before it ever reaches your bloodstream. Strong antibacterial mouthwash, used right before a meal, can blunt the whole effect. Small thing, worth knowing if you're building a habit around this particular root. I'll be honest, the taste takes some getting used to. Earthy, almost mineral. A neighbor of mine calls it dirt juice, and she's not entirely wrong. But roasted, or juiced with an apple to soften the edge, it's an easy plant to build a habit around. Free, if you're growing it yourself. Next, we're moving from the ground to the teapot. Hibiscus tea has a different name depending on where you're standing. Sour tea in parts of the Middle East, sorrel in the Caribbean, carcadi in Egypt, where people have been steeping it for generations without a single clinical trial telling them to. 3 different continents, one plant, one habit that outlasted all of them. Hibiscus works through several different doors at once. Its plant pigments, the same family that gives blueberries and red cabbage their deep color, appear to help relax the muscle lining of blood vessels. A separate diuretic-like effect helps the body shed a little extra fluid. Think of it less like a single key and more like a ring of them, each working a slightly different lock. Multiple trials pooling well over 1,000 participants have found that hibiscus tea meaningfully lowers both numbers in people with mild to moderate high blood pressure. Not enormous, real. The kind of change that, kept up for months and years, actually matters to a heart working every single day. One trial, out of Mexico, compared a standardized hibiscus extract directly against captopril, a common antihypertensive medication, and the plant held its own over several weeks. I want to say this clearly. One trial does not make a replacement, but it is real enough science that the comparison was worth running at all. If you're already on blood pressure medication, mention hibiscus to your doctor before making it a daily habit. 2 to 3 cups a day, unsweetened if you can manage it, is what most of the research used. Steep it a good 10 minutes to pull the color and the compounds all the way out. Simple. A plant that's been a daily ritual for people who never once called it medicine. I used to roll my eyes a little at celery. Bland, watery, the vegetable everyone puts on a diet plate and nobody actually enjoys. Then I read the trials. There's a compound in celery called 3N-butyl phthalate, which is a mouthful. So let's put it in kitchen terms instead. Researchers believe it acts a bit like a natural calcium channel blocker, the same category of drug your doctor might prescribe for high blood pressure, just working through a gentler, food-based door. A pooled analysis of controlled trials found real reductions in both systolic and diastolic pressure with celery preparations, alongside improvements in blood sugar and triglycerides. The strongest results came from celery seed extract at doses of around a gram a day or more, which is considerably more concentrated than what you'd get chewing a few stalks at lunch. Celery seed specifically has a long history in both Chinese and Ayurvedic medicine, used for joint pain and fluid retention centuries before anyone measured blood pressure with a cuff. Modern research circling back to something that old always gives me a strange kind of comfort. The traditional use and the clinical trial data are, for once, pointing in roughly the same direction. This is one where your doctor genuinely should know if you're taking it in extract form, especially alongside blood pressure medication, since the effects can add up rather than cancel out. Worth saying plainly. But the whole stalk, in soups, in a morning juice, in a stew that's been simmering since before the fog lifted, that's simple, God-given food, and it's earned its place on this list. The leafy tops most people toss get thrown away too fast in my kitchen's history. They carry a milder version of the same compounds as the seeds, and chopped fine into a soup or salad. They're not wasted scraps. They're free seasoning sitting right there in the bin. This next one is small enough to disappear into a spoonful of oatmeal, and I nearly overlooked it for exactly that reason. Flaxseed, rare in that it manages to be both a source of plant-based omega-3 fat and a genuinely good source of fiber and lignans, plant compounds with a mild hormone-like effect in the body. Most seeds do one job well. This one does several. A meta-analysis pooling 18 randomized trials found flaxseed supplementation lowered systolic pressure by close to 5 millimeters of mercury on average, and diastolic by around 3. One landmark 6-month trial in people with existing cardiovascular disease reported drops of roughly 15-point systolic in hypertensive participants. That's a number worth pausing on. The lignans in flaxseed are worth their own mention, since they're fairly rare in the plant world at this concentration. They act a little like a gentle hormone regulator in the body, and some researchers think that's part of why flaxseed's effect on blood pressure runs a bit stronger than you'd expect from fiber and omega-3 fat alone. Rare to find a food quite this multi-purpose in one small seed. Whole flaxseed passes right through you undigested, so it has to be ground to do any good. I keep a small hand grinder on the counter and do a fresh batch every few days because it goes rancid fast once it's cracked open. 2 tablespoons stirred into oatmeal or yogurt. That's the dose most of the trials used, and it's about as unassuming a habit as you'll find on this entire list. Brown and golden flaxseed are close enough nutritionally that it mostly comes down to preference and what grows well where you are. I grow the brown variety here, mostly because it handles our damp Oregon springs better than the golden kind ever has for me. Next, we're stepping over to the hedgerow, to a plant that's been called a heart tonic since long before anyone had a word for blood pressure at all. Hawthorn has centuries of folk use behind it in European herbal medicine, mostly for the heart itself, not just the pressure inside the vessels. My grandmother kept a jar of dried hawthorn berries in her pantry, though I couldn't tell you now whether it was her or her sister who taught me to steep them. Well, no matter. The habit stuck either way. Modern trials have looked at standardized hawthorn extract, usually 600 to 1800 milligrams a day, over 2 to 6 months. Several show a meaningful drop in systolic pressure. I want to be honest here, though, because the evidence isn't as tidy as garlics or beetroots. One recent pooled analysis found the effect real, but modest, and researchers were clear that hawthorn alone isn't strong enough to stand in for proper hypertension treatment. Worth knowing, most of the clinical trials behind hawthorn actually used extract made from the leaves and flowers, not just the berries most people picture. The berries are the traditional food-based form, pleasant enough steeped as tea, but if you want something closer to what the research tested, a standardized leaf and flower extract is the more reliable choice. This is one where I genuinely encourage you to bring it up with your doctor before starting, especially if you're already on heart medication, since hawthorn can interact with several common drugs, rare among the plants on this list for needing that much caution. But as a slow, traditional tonic, brewed as tea from the dried berries, it's earned its long history, honestly. Most people only think of the olive itself. Almost nobody thinks about the leaf. And that's a shame, because the leaf may be doing more work than the fruit. Olive leaves contain a bitter compound called oleuropein, which the body seems to use in a way that gently blocks the same conversion step in the body that many blood pressure medications specifically target. That's not me saying the leaf works the same as a drug. It's me saying the two happen to be pointed at the same lock, from different directions. A randomized trial compared standardized olive leaf extract against captopril at a standard starting dose in 232 people with stage 1 hypertension over 8 weeks. The two produced comparable reductions in both systolic and diastolic pressure. I'll say this once, clearly. One trial is not a prescription replacement, but it is a serious, peer-reviewed result, and it means your doctor is the right person to weigh this plant against whatever you're already taking. Olive leaves have been used in Mediterranean folk medicine for a very long time, longer than most written records of the region, and the olive tree itself is often treated as something close to sacred in the cultures that have grown it longest. There's a reason people kept coming back to this tree for more than just its fruit. A broader pooled analysis across several trials confirms a smaller but consistent systolic drop with olive leaf extract generally, particularly in people who already had high readings. I brew mine as a tea from dried leaves, though standardized extract capsules are what most of the trials actually used, so the dose is more reliable there than in a home-steeped cup. Let's talk about pomegranate, one of the oldest cultivated fruits in the world, and one of the most studied for blood pressure in recent years. It shows up in the oldest medicinal texts of more than one tradition: Persian, Ayurvedic, biblical. People reached for this fruit specifically for thousands of years before anyone had a way to measure what it was doing. That kind of consistency across completely separate cultures carries its own weight, as far as I'm concerned. The compounds doing the work here are elegitannins, a family of polyphenols that pomegranate carries in unusually high concentration. Once digested, they act as antioxidants and appear to gently relax the vessel wall, much the way beets and hibiscus do, though through a different chemical door. Multiple pooled analyses now confirm the pattern. A 2024 meta-analysis of 22 trials found pomegranate consumption lowered systolic pressure by close to 8 millimeters of mercury. A separate 2026 analysis of 33 trials across nearly 1,500 participants found a more modest but consistent reduction of 3.5 points, with effects observed in juice, extract, and peel preparations alike. The research is building. If you've never opened one before, here's the trick that saved me a ruined countertop more than once. Score the skin in quarters, then break it apart under water in a bowl. The seeds sink, the white pith floats, and you skip the mess entirely. Small thing, but it's the reason I actually keep this fruit in the house instead of admiring it once a year at the market. A small glass, roughly a cup, most days of the week, is what most of the research used. Watch the sugar content if you're buying it bottled. Fresh, hand-pressed, is worth the extra effort, and it's a blessing from the soil that happens to taste like something worth savoring, not just swallowing. I'll admit, this is the one people always assume I'm exaggerating about. I promise you, I'm not. Dark chocolate and cocoa carry a group of compounds called flavanols, and they work through the same nitric oxide chain reaction we talked about with beets, gently relaxing the blood vessel lining so blood moves with less resistance. The catch is dose. Most milk chocolate has been processed in ways that strip nearly all of the flavanols out. A Cochrane review pooled 35 studies and found flavanol-rich cocoa products lowered blood pressure by a modest but real margin over the short term, particularly in people who already had elevated readings. The effect is dose-dependent. Higher flavanol content, higher impact, which is why the percentage on the label matters more than the brand. Cacao has a genuinely old and medicinal history of its own, used by Mesoamerican cultures for heart and circulation complaints centuries before Europeans ever tasted it. It's a strange thought that something most of us file under dessert started out closer to medicine than candy. Look for a percentage above 70 on the label and treat it the way you'd treat any other daily habit meant to build up over months, not something that lowers a reading in a single afternoon. An ounce a day. Simple. And I won't pretend I mind this particular piece of homework. Where your chocolate comes from matters almost as much as the percentage on the label. A lot of cacao farming still involves real hardship for the people growing it, so a fair trade or direct trade label is worth looking for, not just for your own numbers, but because good stewardship stretches past your own garden gate. This one caught me off guard the first time I read the research, and it takes a fair bit to catch me off guard these days. Kiwi fruit is dense with potassium, vitamin C, and a plant pigment called lutein, all working together rather than any single compound doing the heavy lifting alone. That combination seems to matter more here than it does with some of the single compound plants on this list. In a randomized trial out of Norway, adults with mildly elevated blood pressure who ate 3 kiwi fruits a day for 8 weeks saw a meaningfully greater drop in 24-hour blood pressure than a comparison group eating 1 apple a day. An earlier trial in male smokers found an even larger reduction, alongside improvements in how easily their blood was clotting. Ounce for ounce, kiwi fruit actually carries more vitamin C than an orange, which surprises most people the first time they hear it. That vitamin C works as an antioxidant, protecting the nitric oxide your body's already making from breaking down too quickly, which may be part of why this particular fruit performs as well as it does in the trials. Kiwi fruit actually grows on a vine, not a tree, which still catches people off guard. In the right spot, a hardy variety will handle even a damp Pacific Northwest winter, though most of us are buying ours from the grocery bin rather than growing it along the back fence. 3 a day, roughly, is what the strongest trial used. Rare that a fruit this ordinary ends up outperforming the one everyone's grandmother told them to eat instead. I peel mine, though I've read some folks eat the fuzzy skin whole for the extra fiber. That's a choice I'll leave entirely up to you. I want to be extra careful with this next one because the research is genuinely mixed, and I promised you honesty over hype at the start of this whole project. Ginger contains gingerol, a compound that appears to relax blood vessel walls and improve circulation in laboratory studies, and it's been a staple of traditional medicine across multiple cultures for that exact reason, long before anyone put it under a microscope. A pooled analysis of 6 clinical trials found the overall effect significant, roughly 6 millimeters of mercury systolic. But when the researchers broke it down by age, dose, and duration, the consistent signal only held in a specific corner: adults under 50, taking 3 grams or more a day, over 8 weeks or less. Outside those parameters, the effect became statistically unreliable. I'd rather tell you the honest, complicated version than a tidy one that isn't quite true. I don't want the mixed evidence to make ginger sound like it isn't worth growing. It's been used across Chinese, Ayurvedic, and Middle Eastern medicine for thousands of years, mostly for digestion, nausea, and general inflammation, and those particular uses hold up reasonably well in modern research, even where the blood pressure data specifically stays uncertain. Fresh ginger and the dried powdered kind in your spice rack aren't quite interchangeable here. Fresh root carries more of the gingerol compound intact, while drying converts some of it into a related compound with a milder effect. If you're after the version closest to what the trials used, fresh grated wins out over the spice jar. A cup of fresh ginger tea most mornings is a gentle habit either way, good for digestion regardless of what it does for your numbers, and it costs almost nothing to keep a knob of it in the freezer, grated straight from frozen whenever you want it. This root has been used in Ayurvedic medicine in India for thousands of years, long before Western researchers got around to asking why. Turmeric's active compound, curcumin, is known mostly for calming inflammation throughout the body, and inflamed blood vessels tend to be stiffer, less able to relax on demand. Calmer inflammation, in theory, means more flexible vessels, and more flexible vessels means an easier job for your heart. A recent meta-analysis focused on adults with prediabetes or type 2 diabetes found curcumin or turmeric supplementation modestly lowered systolic pressure, with the strongest results at doses above a gram a day and in people who already had elevated readings to begin with. The effect on the bottom, diastolic number, was less consistent across studies. Worth knowing, the amount of curcumin used in most of these trials, often a gram or more daily, is far higher than what you'd get sprinkling turmeric into a curry now and then. If you want a dose closer to what was actually studied, a standardized extract capsule gets you there more reliably than the spice jar alone. One practical note, because I'd be doing you a disservice to leave it out. Curcumin absorbs poorly on its own, so most trials pair it with black pepper, which contains a compound that dramatically improves uptake. A pinch of black pepper in your golden milk isn't a garnish. It's doing real work. One more caution worth naming. High-dose turmeric or curcumin can thin the blood somewhat, so if you're already taking a blood thinner or you've got surgery coming up, this is one more plant on today's list to mention to your doctor before you start. Back to the summer treat I mentioned earlier. Let's finally name it. Watermelon is where a compound called L-citrulline was first isolated, all the way back in the 1930s. Though it took decades for anyone to connect it to blood pressure specifically. Once eaten, your body converts citrulline into arginine, and arginine feeds directly into the same nitric oxide chain reaction we've talked about twice already today. A recent meta-analysis of 15 randomized trials in middle-aged and older adults found L-citrulline supplementation and watermelon intake meaningfully lowered both systolic and diastolic pressure, with the strongest results when citrulline was paired with arginine rather than used alone. If you're growing your own, older heirloom varieties tend to carry a bit more citrulline in the rind than the modern seedless hybrids bred mostly for sweetness and easy eating. Not a deal breaker if seedless is what your garden already has, just something worth knowing if you're planting with this particular benefit in mind. Most of that citrulline actually concentrates in the white rind, not the sweet red flesh most of us eat, and toss the rest. I've started blending a bit of the rind into smoothies, which sounds strange until you taste it buried under enough berries. Simple, free, in season, and a compound most people throw straight into the trash. Watermelon isn't the only source of citrulline either, just the richest common one by a wide margin. Cucumbers and other members of the same plant family carry smaller amounts, a reasonable backup if watermelon isn't in season where you are. Watermelon is also, unsurprisingly, mostly water, over 90% by weight, which makes it a gentle way to support hydration and steady electrolyte balance in the heat of summer, alongside whatever it's doing for those vessel walls. I want to be upfront about this next one before we even start, because it's the plant on this list I'd hedge on the most. Cinnamon's reputation mostly comes from its effects on blood sugar and cholesterol, where the research is fairly consistent. Blood pressure specifically is a softer story. Some trials show a modest benefit, especially in people managing diabetes alongside high blood pressure. Others show barely anything at all. An umbrella review pooling multiple meta-analyses found cinnamon's effect on blood pressure trending in a favorable direction, particularly at higher doses over shorter windows, but the researchers themselves called for stronger, longer trials before drawing firm conclusions. I'd rather tell you that plainly than dress it up. One more detail matters here, more than people realize. Most cinnamon sold in grocery stores is cassia cinnamon, which contains a compound called coumarin that can strain the liver at high, sustained doses. Ceylon cinnamon, sometimes labeled true cinnamon, contains far less of it. If you're using cinnamon daily rather than occasionally, Ceylon is the safer long-term choice. A cinnamon stick steeped in your morning coffee or tea is a low-risk, low-cost habit regardless, and it seems to help blood sugar management more reliably than it helps blood pressure on its own. I'd call this one a supporting player on this list, not a headliner. Where cinnamon earns its keep most reliably is blood sugar. Several trials show real improvement in fasting blood sugar readings, and since blood sugar and blood pressure are close neighbors in the body, keeping one steadier likely helps the other, even where the direct blood pressure data stays thinner. We're back to the salad plate next, and I promise this one earns its spot honestly. Dark leafy greens, spinach especially, work through the same dietary nitrate process as beets, meaning the body converts them into the same vessel-relaxing signal we talked about earlier. Add potassium and magnesium on top of that, and you have a food covering several of the mechanisms that matter most for blood pressure in one plate. Large observational studies tracking diet over years, alongside smaller controlled trials on high-nitrate vegetable diets, consistently link regular leafy green intake to meaningfully lower blood pressure, particularly when greens replace lower nutrient foods rather than simply getting added on top of an unchanged diet. Spinach isn't the only option here. Arugula, kale, and Swiss chard all carry similar nitrate and potassium profiles, so rotating between them keeps meals interesting. One caution worth mentioning, spinach specifically is high in oxalates, which can matter for people prone to certain kidney stones, so leaning on the other greens more often is a reasonable adjustment if that's you. A cup, cooked, most days. Raw if you'd rather. There's nothing complicated or expensive about this one, and it's exactly the kind of quiet, unglamorous habit that never makes it into a headline but does more for you, over the years, than most of the plants people get excited about. These are some of the easiest plants in the whole garden to grow yourself, tolerant of cool weather, quick from seed to plate, and forgiving of a gardener who forgets to water for a day or two. If you're new to growing any of this list, this is where I'd tell you to start. This next one is so ordinary, I almost left it off the list entirely. That would have been a mistake. Bananas are one of the most concentrated, everyday sources of potassium, and potassium works almost like a counterbalance to sodium in the body, helping your kidneys release a little extra salt and easing tension in the vessel walls at the same time. The connection between potassium-rich eating patterns and lower blood pressure is one of the best established findings in all of nutrition research, going back to the original DASH diet trials decades ago, where increasing potassium-rich foods produced blood pressure drops that rivaled some medications in a food-based, whole diet context. One caution belongs here, because potassium isn't automatically safe for everyone. People with kidney disease often need to limit potassium rather than increase it, since damaged kidneys can't clear the extra as efficiently. If that describes you, or someone you're cooking for, this is a conversation for your doctor before you start stacking potassium-rich foods on the plate. One medium banana most days, alongside other potassium-rich foods like potatoes with the skin on, or white beans. Simple. Nobody needs a study to convince them to eat a banana, but it's worth knowing this ordinary fruit is quietly doing some of the most well-documented work on this entire list. Bananas get most of the public credit here, but avocados, white beans, and a baked potato with the skin on actually carry more potassium per serving. I mentioned bananas first because they're the easiest, cheapest entry point, the kind of food nobody needs a study to motivate. Riper bananas carry a bit more natural sugar and less resistant starch than a slightly green one, worth knowing if you're watching blood sugar alongside blood pressure. Either way, the potassium content barely changes with ripeness, so there's no wrong time to reach for one. Let's talk about what's sitting in most people's pantry already, waiting for a Tuesday morning. Oats carry a soluble fiber called beta-glucan, well known for lowering cholesterol, but the same fiber also seems to support healthier blood vessel function and steadier blood sugar, both of which matter for pressure over the long run, even if the direct evidence on oats and blood pressure specifically is thinner than on cholesterol. Oats show up repeatedly in the DASH and Mediterranean eating patterns that have the strongest blood pressure research behind them of any whole diet studied, though it's the combination of whole grains, fiber, and displaced processed foods doing the heavy lifting, not oats standing entirely alone. Not all oats are equal here. Heavily processed instant oats digest fast and spike blood sugar in a way that works against you. Steel-cut or old-fashioned rolled oats keep that beta-glucan fiber more intact and digest slower, which matters more than people think when you're trying to build a habit that actually does something. A warm bowl, most mornings, with a spoonful of that ground flaxseed we already talked about stirred in. 2 plants from this list, 1 bowl. Before you've even left the house. Rare that a habit this simple stacks up quite so neatly. Oats were considered plain food for most of history, animal feed in some cultures, peasant food in others. And yet, here they are, a fixture in every serious dietary intervention that's ever shown consistent blood pressure benefit. Humble and right. A pinch of that Ceylon cinnamon we talked about earlier, stirred into the same bowl, and you've stacked 3 plants from today's list into breakfast without much effort at all. That's usually how these habits actually stick, 1 bowl at a time, not 18 separate projects. We're ending where a lot of traditions began, with a plant considered sacred long before it was ever studied in a laboratory. Holy basil, also called tulsi, has been grown in Indian households for centuries, often right at the doorstep, considered a small piece of the sacred kept close to daily life. I think there's something honest in that instinct, treating a plant like it's worth more than its ingredients list. In Ayurvedic tradition, tulsi is used as what's sometimes called an adaptogen, a plant believed to help the body manage stress more gracefully, and stress hormones themselves are closely tied to blood pressure spikes. Modern research here is genuinely early, mostly animal studies and small human trials, alongside a long, well-documented traditional history of use for blood pressure, blood sugar, and general resilience. The fog rolls in most mornings before I've even had my coffee, and tulsi is one of the few plants out there that seems to shrug it off entirely. Sturdy through weather most of my other plants sulk about. Chronic stress keeps cortisol elevated, and elevated cortisol is one of the quieter contributors to high blood pressure that doesn't get talked about nearly enough alongside diet and salt. I'll say it plainly. Since I've tried to all day, this is one of the least proven plants on this entire list, in the strict clinical sense, but it's also one of the longest standing, generations of quiet, consistent use, and I don't think that history should be dismissed just because the modern trials haven't caught up yet. A cup of tulsi tea in the evening, however it works, is a gentle, God-given way to end a day. 18 plants, most of them already somewhere in your kitchen or your garden. None of them dramatic, all of them patient. If you only remember 3 from today, let it be these. Garlic, for the sheer weight of decades of research behind it. Beets, for how quickly the effect shows up. And hibiscus, steeped as easily as any tea you already drink. Start there, and the rest of this list will follow naturally. None of them replace what your doctor is doing for you, and I'll never tell you otherwise. What they can do is sit alongside that care, quietly, the way good food always has, long before anyone needed a study to prove it was worth eating. None of this works overnight, and I'd be lying if I told you otherwise. A garden doesn't hand you a harvest the week you plant it, and your blood vessels don't rebuild themselves in an afternoon either. Patience is most of the actual medicine here. Here's my garden fence question for you today, and I'd genuinely love to read your answer. Of these 18, which one is already growing somewhere near you, and did you have any idea it was doing this much work? If this kind of digging into the research behind ordinary plants is useful to you, stay a while. Subscribe so the next one finds you. I've got a lot more of this garden left to walk through with you. Now, before I let you go back to your own kitchen, your own garden, whatever patch of ground you've got, take care of the numbers your doctor's watching for you. Take care of the soil under your feet while you're at it. May the Lord keep you healthy, and I'll see you next time.